Hey all, Tom Moran here from Tom's Big Spider. So for all of you Aphonopelma fans, as you've probably seen from the thumbnail, we're going to go ahead and rehouse my Aphonopelma eutylenum or California Ebony. I've had this spider for quite a while now, and it's actually growing, I will say, growing much more quickly than a lot of my Aphonopelma species. And that's important to note because Aphonopelma are notorious for being some of the slowest growing spiders you can possibly raise up. They make excellent beginner species for most folks, but anybody who's picking one up as a sling has to recognize that for a lot of this, we pick one up early on in our tarantula keeping career. And by the time those things are, young adults, we've already been established in the hobby for years, sometimes even over a decade. So just keep that in mind. They are slow growing, but this one definitely is in desperate need of a rehousing. I've been waiting for her to kind of fatten up a little bit to get her into something else. So we're going to go ahead and put her into a new enclosure. So enough of me talking. Let's take a look at Aphonopelma eutylenum or the California Ebony. All right, so as you've probably deduced from the intro, we're about to rehouse my Aphonopelma eutylenum or California Ebony. They get the name California Ebony because I believe it's the mature males that actually get really dark. And we're gonna go ahead and flip this thing up. And as you can see, she definitely needs a rehousing. I'm gonna explain this in a minute, but I think the females, from what I've seen from the pictures, look more like kind of faded out acalcotas. The males get black. I'm hoping I have a lady here. Now, I'll be talking about this a couple times. I have a lot of Aphonopelma species. They do not grow. I want to make that very clear. I've had a bunch of people coming on asking me to do updates. I did an update just over a year ago, and there hasn't been much of a change since then. So I am going to do one coming up. I'll talk more about that at the end of the video. But for right now, I figure this will appease some of the people that have been asking for Aphonopelma footage. This one here was about a ½ inch when I got her in January of 2021. That's, I think, 1.27 centimeters. And around a ½ inch, probably closer to 3/4 of an inch, honestly. The last update we did was in July of 2023, so a little over a year and a half ago. And at that point, we had just put her into this enclosure, and she was around an inch or so, or 2.5 centimeters. So she's been growing a little bit better than some of my other ones, like my moray that has, I swear, when she molts now, she loses size. It's ridiculous. This enclosure here, I believe, is one of the 3x3x3 tarantula cribs sling enclosures. I think there's a thing on here somewhere.
On the other side.
On the other side. All right. So I have some of these. These are decent for slings. Just be careful. The one thing I've noticed, well, a couple things just to have a heads up on. Number one, the magnets freak me out sometimes only because, for example, I went to feed her the other night, or it was about a week ago. I took the top off. I dropped the roach and she went, overshot the roach and hung out outside and had her hands or legs curled over it. And it was difficult. I was afraid to even try to put the cover back on because it could snap in. So always be careful of that. Make sure the spider's out of the way before you put the cover on. I know there's a way you can kind of put it, maneuver it so they can snap on that way. Just there's always that final click. Oh, there she goes, getting angry with me. She did this the other night too. So heads up with that. And then if you're keeping slings, these are very well ventilated. They're excellent as far as ventilation, but you have to be a little more attentive, a little more careful to make sure that they don't dry out too quickly. That's a good thing. You want good cross ventilation. That's excellent. But then you want to make sure that the enclosures don't dry out too quickly. Now, when she was little, this is the thing with the Aphonopelmas. A lot of people read that they're desert species, so they think you have to keep them bone dry. Not at all. They do appreciate, they will burrow. They do appreciate having moist substrate in the bottom. And I found that will draw out some of that burrowing behavior on them. So for this one, usually what I would end up doing, and I haven't, this would be normally when I'm wetting down the corner and making sure that the bottom layers are moist. But when it was a baby, I would pour water down the side, keep the bottom moist. She would usually burrow down into that. The top would stay dry. Look, she's getting a little nasty. This one's kind of funny as heck.
Fresh.
Oh, she was fresh last night, or 2 nights ago. I went to open it, and again, she crawled out and wouldn't go back in. But you want to make sure with the Aphonopelma, and I just addressed a comment from somebody who was keeping calcotas. They had a sling, and they're like, I got it bone dry. No. Keep that bottom level moist. They can dig down to it. In the wild, they will dig down to the point where they can find some of that moisture that they need. So, and I found that a lot of them appreciate that when you give it to them. If you give it to them bone dry substrate, they'll sit on top. But if you moisten down that bottom level, a lot of times you'll get that burrowing behavior, which is why you can't see a lot of mine right now, because I do that and they tend to burrow down to the bottom. So just a heads up there. Now, as far as what we're going to put her into, we've got this here. I think this is one of the old school, the OG herp cult enclosures. The herp cult? Yeah, herp cult. I got this one years ago when herp cult were the big ones as far as the acrylic enclosures. This one here is about 6 inches by 6 inches by 8 inches, or 15.25 by 15.25 by 20.32 centimeters. She's going to be in this for a while. Normally, I don't put, like, this is one I would normally use for like centipedes, or small not centipedes, scorpions, a small scorpion or something, because they're not going to outgrow it. She will probably eventually outgrow this, but because she's so slow growing. I figure we got plenty of time for her to play around in here before she puts on enough size that she needs another rehousing. Yeah, I know, I'm watching her. So we're going to give her this here. It's got the substrate. I don't know if it's going to show up, but the bottom layer is moist. The top layer is dry, again, to encourage that burrowing behavior. I've got a cork bark hide with a starter burrow, some leaf litter just for aesthetics, some New Zealand sphagnum moss. I just bought a new brick of sphagnum moss the other day. I was so excited because I got it for 20 bucks. And I realized it's half the size of the last time I bought one for 20 bucks. So I don't know what's going on with that, but holy geez. But what we're going to do now, she's already starting to climb out of this. So I'm going to go ahead and get her into this one. I think what we're going to do is the old poke her in the butt and see if she'll just come out on her own. Oh, easy. There you go. And this will be good because if she doesn't, we're kind of inadvertently blocking off the burrow here. Go, go, go. New home. There you go. Now look at her little butt. Look at her little butt. So I get the damn brush out of my butt. All right, honey, you gotta get off of this. I need the enclosure. There we go. Look, she did like a little pamphlet thing with the button here. Now she's leaving. Right now she's dropping the little line. Look at her. Reminds me a lot of what Nikki looked like back in the day. Nikki is my Aphonopelma calcotas. And speaking of somebody that goes out of her enclosure every time I open it, that freaking spider has more personality. I went to take pictures of her the other day, or I think it was Instagram, and as I was taking the picture, she's coming at me. And the next thing you know, she's crawled over it. I never know what she's thinking, though. It's like I'm not one that handles spiders. There's part of me that's thinking she just wants to hang, and there's another part of me thinking she thinks she can take me. So I'm not sure with her. She's always got a bit of an attitude. So anyway, again, we will be putting, or I didn't say this already, we will be putting a water dish in here. I did have a bottle cap water dish in that other enclosure, and a heads up as to why she is so big and that enclosure is so small. I haven't seen her out all that much. Until recently, she basically had a burrow underneath the dirt. I dropped down something, she'd eat it. She was eating great, but recently it collapsed and she's been on top of it. So it's time for her, obviously, to have a new home. So this will give her plenty of room to kind of do her thing, to burrow. And I'm assuming she's eventually going to find her way into that starter burrow and do some digging. Now, as far as feeding these guys, a heads up, I found that some of my smaller Aphonopelma species can be kind of finicky. And how do you put it? They're kind of scared eaters. In other words, if you drop something in that seems like a normal size prey item for them, they kind of shy away from it. With her early on, when she was about a half an inch to 3/4 of an inch, I would pre-kill prey items and then leave them in there with her. She would eat that way. It wasn't until she hit over an inch or so that she started eating much, much better. And at that point, I started throwing in smaller red runner roaches, and she had no problem taking them down. Now, if I drop in a prey item, she's on it. So just know early on, if you're keeping Aphonopelma slings and you're dropping in live prey and they're kind of running away from her, cowering in the corner, just pre-kill the prey, leave it there, and they will feast on them, especially if they're burrowing. What I like to do to make sure the prey item doesn't end up in the burrow where the spider might be possibly molting is I'll pre-kill it, leave it on the top of the burrow, let it come out and eat it. And then as far as temperatures here, as always, in the wintertime, I keep the thermostat set at 74, I think now. So bottom shelves are usually around 73, 74. Higher shelves, where this one's been on, are usually 74, 75, sometimes 76. Summertime, it usually gets to 80 to 85. If it gets any higher than that, I will kick on the AC. And recognize that this is a spider because it's a North American species that does quite fine. If you were to keep this one at lower temperatures, it would do just fine. These are spiders that are in areas. It's like I have my egg calcotas that is from, I think, Superstition Mountains. It was originally Aphonopelma schmidti, and mine was particularly from the Superstition Mountains region. Somebody contacted me a while back when I posted a video of Nikki telling me that they had snow on the ground and that the spiders have to burrow because it gets very, very cold there. So keep in mind, if you're freaking out about the temperatures, a lot of these guys come from areas where they do have to basically bury themselves and hide out for the winter. And she is a cutie. So hopefully this one helps satisfy some of the folks who've been asking for Aphonopelma updates. Again, I'm going to put one together. I'll talk about it again in the outro to this video, but a lot of mine are just, they grow very slowly. I would say between Grammostola, Aphonopelma, and Brachypelma, I think that my Aphonopelmas right now take the cake for being some of the most slow growing spiders I keep. With the Grammostola porteri rosea that I have, that is now, I think, 11 years old, 12 years old, and she's about maybe 1.75 inches, probably the slowest growing spider I have. But as far as a genus as a whole, my Aphonopelmas are very, very slow growing, but they are amazing spiders. They're very sought after in the hobby, especially in Europe. Over here, they're a little more prevalent, I think, and from what I've heard from our European friends, they're a little more difficult, a little more expensive, or a little more difficult to find, a little more expensive over there, but definitely worth the wait, especially with those, look at her, I love those earthy tones. So Aphonopelma eutylenum, California ebony, in her new enclosure, and I will obviously update people. It's one of the things I'm going to start doing again is every couple of months or so going back and looking at some of the ones we rehouse, and we'll see if she actually uses that burrow and does some burrowing. So again, I'm not mentioning the slow growth as a knock. I just like people to realistically appreciate what they're getting into when they pick up certain spiders. Sometimes if people don't do the correct research, they'll hear, hey, this species is fantastic. They'll pick one up as a sling, and then they're shocked to find out that it could be years before it's starting to show some adult color. So I just want to get that out there for those of us who get really into the hobby. It never ends up being really a big deal. I joke all the time about my Aphonopelma species that they almost sometimes seem to molt and get smaller. I have an Aphonopelma more, that the Jade Fuego that I have. So many people ask me, can we get an update? It just molted again. I thought it picked up some blue. No, it's really just kind of a dark gray now. It did put on some size, I guess. I'm having difficulty telling how much, probably a very minuscule amount, but just know that once these guys, like many of the other slower growing gab species, Grammostola and Brachypelma included, once they hit about 1 inch or so, they tend to not only molt a little bit more often, but put on a lot more size with each molt. So you have to just get them from that teeny tiny stage to about 1 inch, and then things pick up from there. So for folks who have been asking me for an update on Aphonopelmas, I tend to get at least a comment a week for somebody saying, please update on your Aphonopelmas. Know that I'm not just being difficult. I just haven't had anything to report. There hasn't been much going on. Usually I like to do updates when there's something to report, so I can show some changes. Either I'm doing some rehousings or they're showing some more color, and there hasn't been a lot of that. However, recently, a couple of them are have molted. They're looking pretty. If I can catch them out in the open, I will do an update. Even if I can't catch them out in the open, we'll do an update on some of the Aphonopelmas very soon, possibly in the next week or so when I have my spring break, because I'll have a little extra time to do it. So that will do it for this one. As always, if you liked it enough to subscribe, very much appreciate. You can click the little circle up in there. I'll put some other videos, maybe another Aphonopelma video over here. If you take the time to comment, I'll take the time to respond. Just know it can take me a little while because I get busy, usually about a week or so. Guys, as always, stay safe, enjoy your weekend, have a great one.